Hi, Chris. Good morning. How are you?
Good, good. How are you doing?
So we just spoke a little bit, and you grew up just outside Corpus Christi, and then you're currently a fireman, paramedic, tactical medic, Corpus Christi Fire Department. Been doing that for about 6 years. You're 33, so you've been doing that since you were 27. What did you do after high school? What did you go into after high school?
So during high school, I figured I wanted to be a mechanic, and I ended up working in body shops doing auto body paint, and didn't really have much direction after high school. So I did that for years, and then my little brother ended up joining the Marines, and so I got talking to him, and man, he was thriving out there. The camaraderie and everybody that just that bond that they all built together. And man, that's kind of what I'm missing. I need to find something along those lines that fits my lifestyle.
Did you play sports in high school?
I did. I played football and baseball mostly.
Was So you're there in Texas. I imagine it's competitive. What was your position in football?
Outside linebacker.
Oh, so you played linebacker. How tall are
Yeah.
you now?
5'10",
5'10", and what do you weigh?
185.
So 185. So you're right in there. So you were kind of a lean linebacker then. You weren't very,
Yeah,
like
very
you're,
much so.
yeah. So you were one of those overachievers, like to hit and got the position, or how did that work at high school?
Oh yeah, taking the hits and making the hits. That was it, man. Put myself out there and giving and receiving the hits.
Tell me a little bit about Texas high school. Is it like Friday Night Lights, or is it that hyped up, or what is it like? Or football?
It honestly is. Texas high school sports in general are a huge thing, but football being the main one. The neighboring school district for us was, state champions so many years running, and so it was always that rivalry with us, and it's very much a real thing.
Yeah. And so football was a fall, and then what was your position in baseball? Spring,
Right field.
right field. So you could run.
Yeah.
You're fast then,
Oh
fielder.
yeah, yeah. I grew up playing more unconventional sports. My dad was a surfer and a skateboarder growing up, and so we grew up kind of in those roles. And I really think that kind of helped out the endurance and the speed growing up since I was super young, doing that kind of cardio intensive work.
Do you still surf there? How much surfing is at Corpus Christi? Is there a lot, or is it good?
It's decent, right? It's not the best out there, but we get some good, 35-foot swells. And I haven't been surfing much lately. The recent jobs and everything else keep me super busy, so I don't get out there as much as I'd like to. But yeah, it's definitely out there, and there's a good group of guys that go.
Do you still skate at all?
I do whenever, not as much when I'm trying to avoid injury, because it seems
Yeah,
like the older I get, the more injured I get every time I go.
right. Do they have a good? Do you like skate around the station, or do you have a park you go to, or how's that work?
Yeah, so we've got a couple good parks here in Corpus. I grew up skating with my dad and his friends, right? So they're back in the Dogtown days, skating empty pools and stuff like that. So that's always
Yeah,
been my go-to where my friends, they grew up with younger skaters, would be, the stair sets and the rails and all that, the empty pools and the old school type skating.
you ever poach swimming pools late at night or something to skate in when you're a kid or now?
When I was a kid, yeah, not in a long time, but yeah.
That's so interesting. Your dad is probably my age. I got 20 years on you, and I kind of was around. I remember skateboards came on. I was in elementary school. This would be like the early 80s, probably late 70s. Yeah, I've seen that Dogtown movie. I remember skateboards came on and stuff. That's kind of interesting. So you're cranking along. Your brother's in the Marines. He had that teamwork stuff from football. Why'd you go fire service instead of police or military?
So it's actually kind of an interesting question, right? My little brother was, he was dead set on the Marines for as long as I could remember. He had that plan solid. Right? And I was
Even
more
as
a
a
little bit,
kid, he was going that
yeah,
direction. Okay, yeah,
yeah. And I was a little bit more fluid. I was kind of just didn't really know what I wanted to do until I found out, about his camaraderie brotherhood, and I figured that's something I wanted. My grandpa was actually in law enforcement, and so I had talked to him. That's something I considered. And then we actually have a couple family friends, multiple that were in the fire department. and I got talking to them about it. And, it was kind of that decision laid out is, I'd considered a military career, a law enforcement career, and a fire department career. And the fire department's it's what called to me the most, after speaking to those guys, you know, the, the brotherhood of that station, right? You're going to spend, for us, we work, 24-hour shifts and we get 48 hours off. So they explained that to me, and you're spending a third of your lives with these guys, right? And they become your second family, and y'all do, trust your lives to each other and do everything together. So that really was an appealing part to me, along with, all the fun stuff we get to do at fires.
What was the application like? Was it competitive? Did it take a while to get through, or was it
Yeah.
fairly in and out? Go
So
ahead.
yeah, so for me, it took a while to get through, right? And this has been a talking point for me for many years now since I've been on. But, I made some dumb mistakes when I was in my late teens, and I actually got
Dumb mistakes
arrested.
being like, yeah, I get it. Go ahead. Criminal stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So I got arrested, and by the time I figured out when I was, you know, 21, 22, that hey, like the fire department, that's the career I want to do. I started applying, and well, I would get kicked out on the background check. So the process,
What was the arrest for?
the arrest was I was 19 on spring break. It was public intoxication, minor in possession of alcohol, just
Got it. Got it.
college kid spring break stuff that I just
Right. Yep.
made those bad decisions. So
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, so yeah, I would get kicked out on the background check every year, right? It's a year long process. You apply in about February, and you'll be hired on the next January. So it's, an 11-month process, and the background check doesn't come into play until after your written test and your physical ability test, and then they'll do the background check.
You do that. Do you guys do the CPAT for the physical ability test?
We do, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
So I ended up applying for 6 years in a row, but knowing the first 5 years, knowing I was going to get kicked out anyways. But it gave me that experience of every year my written test scores got better, every year my CPAT time got better, and it gave me face time with the guys out there running those events, the firefighters that run those. And man, by the time I got hired on, I was on first name basis with half the guys there, where the other people applying didn't really know anybody.
Oh, interesting. Were you applying to other services and or law enforcement at the same time, or are you just focused on Corpus Christi Fire Department?
Yeah, no, I was focused on the Corpus Christi Fire Department. That was the goal. That was what I was going to get, and it didn't really matter what it took to get it.
And you were a mechanic and auto body shop doing stuff this whole time?
Yes, yeah, I was painting cars at this time, and I would show up in my uniform on my lunch break to run the CPAT, and so
Oh, interesting. 6 years. Good for you. And so now you're at the Central Station. Is that right? In Corpus Christi?
yeah, so I'm at a what we call in town.
In town?
Corpus has that. Yeah, they have that. Well, we're pretty wide. We got roughly 400 square miles that we cover
I've been to
around
Corpus
the.
actually, yeah, and it was spread out, it
Okay,
seemed. Yeah.
yeah. So, we have what our in town and our outlying stations. I've always been, since I've been with the department at an in town station. I'm more centrally located in the city now, where I was, on some of the busier units on the west side when I first got turned out.
About 300,000 people, I was just reading about Corpus. It's 5% or so Hispanic or Latino backgrounds. And I said it was a little bit higher in crime and stuff like that. Tell me about Corpus. What's it like? I guess, you're in the city or the more centrally located. Are you at a busy station?
I'm not at the busiest station, right? So, as far as stations go, we're busy because we run a ladder company and a medic unit. So, with the way our fire dispatches work, our ladder company, being centrally located, goes to a lot of fires.
Let's unpack that a little bit. What's a ladder company? Truck with a
So,
ladder?
yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
it's going to be a truck with a ladder. It has an aerial device at the top, right? So we have a 107-foot straight ladder with four flies that come off of our truck. You have ladder companies, you have truck companies. Truck companies being they have a bucket on top where you can actually stand in and maneuver, and ours is just a 107-foot ladder that we can control.
Got it. Okay. And then you said a medic unit also. You're a paramedic, but tell me about the medic unit.
Yeah. So one of the great things about Corpus, and I love this about it, is that everybody in the fire department's a paramedic.
Oh, everybody. So you all have to go through a paramedic school and get all your calls.
We all do, yes. So our academy is actually 16 to 18 months long, right in there to
Wow.
train up. Yeah. So you go through paramedic school and then you go through fire. So you come in with nothing, knowing nothing, and you leave a paramedic and with your fire certifications.
And that's an official paramedic certification, so it's a real deal.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, you got your national registry and your state certification by the time you walk out of there.
Wow, interesting. Tell me about how many calls are you getting? Does your station get a year? Do you know?
A year is hard to say. We will average on our ambulance about 15 to 18 calls on a 24-hour shift,
Really?
and then we can average about 10 to 13 on the ladder company.
On a shift.
Yes. Yeah,
Does
throughout the
a
24 hours.
does a ladder truck go with every ambulance call, or is that a case by case decision?
It's case by case. It's up to dispatch, right? They have certain criteria. If the caller states, it meets this criteria, they're going to send us with extra resources such as a ladder company or another engine company or something like that. If it's just your kind of run of the mill sick call, the ambulance goes by itself and they make the calls there.
So Corpus has government ambulance services. Is there a private ambulance service in Corpus also, or is it all government? The fire department. Nine. Go ahead.
Yeah, 911 is all the fire department. Yeah. So there's no privates that run. We have some county ambulances that run with us, like what we call ESDs. So they run, but generally outside the city limits because we still have a large population outside the city limits that Corpus has to get kind of approval for to run outside city limits. So we have three county stations that run ambulances with us also.
Really? Are you riding in the ambulance now, or are you riding the ladder truck?
I do both. So I do basically one shift on the ambulance and one shift on the ladder truck, and then I just rotate that.
When you go on the ambulance run, are you in your bunker gear, or are you just in? Do you bring your bunker gear with you?
Yeah, so we have a compartment in the outside for our bunker gears.
Got
You
it.
got to have that on you at all times, regardless whether you're on the ambulance or not. You're a firefighter no matter what. Whether you're on the ambulance that day, but if something happens where you need to get in that bunker gear, car extrications or something where you need that protection, you got to have it available to you.
So your station, you're at 24 on, 48 off. So there's three crews that run the station, and the station. Make sure I understand the command perspective. The station has one captain, but each crew has some type of crew boss, right? What's that person called?
So we actually have a captain per shift.
Oh, really? A captain per shift. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we'll have at our station, we run a four-man crew on our ladder truck and then two people on the ambulance. So we have six people at our station at all times.
Right.
And then we'll have a captain and an engineer. And then a captain, that's his role is as the officer of that shift at that station. And then we have the engineer, which his job is driving the ladder truck, knowing that ladder truck inside and out. And then we'll have what we call four EMS twos, which is the rank I currently am. And we alternate on the ladder truck and the ambulance. And then we'll usually have one firefighter one, which is a newer person that hasn't promoted yet and kind of getting their feet wet still.
So each crew is six people. Then, do you have any women on your crew? Or is it all men?
No, we do. We have, yep, one female on our crew. We've had a couple come through, right? Sometimes the newer people rotate through the station to get different experiences. They kind of move them around until they promote and find their home. But yeah, we've had an EMS too. Yeah, we have one female on our crew.
How long have you been at that station?
Going on 3 years now, and I spent 3 years at an engine company station before that.
And are you with the same crew the whole 3 years, or do you rotate within the crews at the same station?
So I've been fortunate when I was at the engine company station before, I was with the same crew I'm with now for the most part.
Also, the whole crew moved over.
Yeah, it's an odd situation and it never really happens, but the spots opened up for the captain and us EMS twos to move over to the new station. And we're like, hey man, we've all been on an engine company for, 3 years, 5 years. The captain had been on there for almost 10. So let's move to a ladder truck. We have the options, learn some different skills, get some different work in. And so we all got to move over to the new station and kind of learn together.
Take me on a typical ambulance call. I mean, what is it? We did a story one time. people sign up for the fire service. You know, they train up to fight fires. They get to their station and they end up running ambulance calls a lot of times for homeless people or overweight people, and that's 90% of their job is running ambulances. Some of the firefighters are a little resentful about that. They're like, I didn't want to be an ambulance person. I wanted to be if I wanted to be an ambulance, it would have been EMS. What's it like for you? Is it mostly ambulance calls? I can't imagine there's too many structural fires. Go through kind of what the overall kind of what the calls are like.
Yeah, so I think that's something you run into a lot of guys that are in a fire service only and not a combined fire EMS like we are. So it's very clear when you get on with our department, you're gonna run EMS calls. That's gonna be, they tell you, that's 90% of your job. But the other, 10% making those fires, it's worth it to run those 90% EMS to me, right? So
The fires
yeah,
are more
but
fun, I bet, just from a
oh yeah,
job perspective. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But you're definitely not wrong. As far as running those EMS calls, 85 to 95% is going to be your homeless guy sleeping on a bus bench and just needs to be woken up, or somebody that hasn't taken their medications or isn't taking care of themselves and needs to get transported to, just go get their medications refilled or something like that. So it's annoying when it happens with the same person multiple times, right? Because, they're obviously not taking care of themselves and getting to the point where they're almost abusing the 911 system and taking away ambulances from other emergencies. But, at the same time, that's where what we call community paramedicine comes into play, trying to help them figure out, well, why aren't you doing these things? Why do we have to keep coming back here, and helping them get those, problems solved.
We once did kind of we called it a scrum, but we brought in different athletes from all types of different backgrounds and jobs. We had police guys there and firemen and military guys. And one of the individuals was he was on a full-time SWAT team at the time, but he had spent 8 years as a patrol officer. And he would describe that too. He's like, you end up just going to the same people or the same type of person again and again and again and again. And he felt like it was, that classic story of the guy who's pushing the boulder up the hill and he gets to the top and it
Yeah.
rolls down. Same for you, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, there's addresses like that I hear over dispatch from, like, oh, yep, I already know that person's name. I already know why they're calling, their date of birth. Right. So it's, you get those people where you just make them, you know, sometimes multiple times within that 24-hour shift.
Oh,
But
really? It's the same person again and again and again.
yeah, and it's not always medical calls. It could be like, they fell down, they just need help up. Right. I mean, we do that. We do lift assists, especially on the ladder. That's one of the things that we do. So it's, it's part of the service that we provide, but it does get to a point where it's like, hey, how can I help you to where this isn't such a common thing? But a lot of times they don't want the help, or they don't accept the help you provide them.
Are there people that you've worked with you just start getting angry like about that and have problems letting it go?
Yeah, I mean, it's burnout. It's a real thing whenever you run, in the fire service, the EMS service especially, that people, they get fed up with it. And I get it to a certain extent, but also, this is your job, right? You signed up for it, so you want to do your best you can to, like I said, educate these people where it doesn't happen. But it gets to a point to where there's only so much you can do. And that's why a lot of times whenever guys get burnt out, they start getting angry like that. Hopefully they move to what we call the outlying stations, right? A little bit slower. They don't make as many calls. It gives them the chance to relax and not have to deal with that all the time. So it gives them a little bit of break from all that.
Do those guys self-select or do they command see the problem and help them along?
Generally, it's, they'll recognize it. The crew will kind of have a talk with them, and like, hey, I think it's time for you to move to a slower station. Like, we like you, but mental health wise, everything else, like, I think it's time for you to, start looking at a different station, something a little bit slower. And usually, if command has to make that decision, it's gotten too far in the first place. So
You've done actually done I've done quite a bit of work on fire departments and fitness culture at first responder units. And there was an interesting thing that kind of happened, and you can tell me if this is what you've seen at your crew. Fired up guys who want to work, are generally the guys who like to train, and eventually those guys end up at the busiest stations. And so you'll have this concentration of really qualified, high performing individuals at the busiest stations, and the less qualified individuals or people who aren't as fired up or motivated get to the slower stations. And what this kind of creates is a really interesting dynamic where you have some stations that are really well run and high performing, and then you get a lot of outside stations that are nowhere near that quality. Is that something that you've seen in that department there?
It definitely happens. It's just, and a lot of times, some of these guys at these outlying, these slower stations have been at these busy stations. We're not such a big department where you can just go to a slow station and, be there
Because
your whole career for the most part.
okay,
So you're going to rotate through that busy station, but the guys that are fired up and train and want to do it usually stay at these busy stations longer, right? They're not going to take that trip to the outlying as soon.
do you is there a deal in the command where they'll take and they'll see a low performing station and they'll say, uh, sorry, Chris, you're going to head out there and help the motivation where they'll take guys from the busier, higher performing guys and send them to the lower performing stations just to tighten those units up?
Not so much, no, as far as moving stations. So we have 4 battalions within our department right now. And so a battalion consists of multiple stations, and you have a battalion chief over those. Like there's 4 stations in our battalion. And so if there's a lower performing station in our battalion, then he might say, hey, you know what? This station, go work with that lower performing station, and y'all are going to train together to get everybody up to par.
So
So
when you
they'll
say go
do
work and
multiple
train
companies.
together, how would that work exactly? I mean, because do you do that on duty, or would you do training evolutions, or how would that work?
Yeah, it'd be on duty. Yeah, we have at our fire academy, we have buildings, multiple story concrete structures where we can run different scenarios and do live burns in there and work with the guys.
So when you're doing that kind of training, you're still on call. So if you get a call, you got to head out to answer the call, but you're able to do some of that training on duty then.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Tell me about the dynamics at the station. I mean, you've got 6 people, 5 other people you're working with. You're in there 24/7. You're getting 15 calls a shift. How much sleep are you getting?
On average, 5 hours, maybe six on a good night, maybe 2 or 3 hours on a bad night. It just depends on the call volume.
Is that sleep like cumulative, so 5 hours and 2 hour stretches, or is it possible actually to get 5 hours sleep a night and not get called out and getting broke up?
It's possible. It doesn't happen often. You're usually how we count it most of the time is calls after midnight. Those are the calls that count because those are the calls that interrupt your sleep. So if you're making 4 calls after midnight, yeah, you're probably getting a couple hours of sleep that night. But we can always bank on at least making 1 call after midnight. So your sleep's going to get broken up no matter what.
Right. And you at the station, I guess guys are sharing racks, right? So you'll come in and sleep in the. It's not like you have 18 different beds at a station, right?
No, yeah, yeah. We share racks between the shifts. We have 8 beds in the back total.
8 beds in the back total. Take me through, I guess, a typical call. So you get a call. Let's say it's for someone's on the street, unresponsive. Say that comes at 1 in the morning. That call comes through. Is there an alarm in the station that goes off, or how does that? You guys all have walkie-talkies, beepers, or whatever. How is everybody notified? Is
Yeah, so
everybody
we
asleep, or is there one person awake all the time?
Oh no, yeah, we usually knock out. So we have
Go
what we
ahead.
call a Zetron system, and
Okay.
it's a loudspeaker that comes through, and we have different tones for the ambulance and the ladder, so they sound different. And then whenever, doesn't matter which tone, if one of them goes off, every light in the station turns on. So if you're sleeping, it's boom, it clicks, those tones go off, and all those lights come on. So whether it's your call or not, you're waking up, and which is the other thing.
Right, right. So even if you're on the ladder and you're in the ambulance call, you're still getting woke up. Even though the ambulance guys are the only ones who respond. Right.
Yeah. So they were going out the door. You're still woke up, but you get to roll back over and try and go back to bed.
Got it. Got it. And what's the standard response time? I mean, what's the response time standard? In other words, from the call to you're driving out the driveway or going through the door on the in the truck.
So it should be less than 60 seconds for you to get there into the truck.
Oh,
That's
really? Less than
Yeah.
60
So
seconds. Wow.
yeah, so 60 seconds is what we shoot for. You get about 90 or so, 90 seconds, but you want to be leaving that driveway within 2 minutes.
So if you're on the ladder team, then you got to get into your bunker gear, right? Or I assume
Yeah.
before you get in the truck. So that's all set up. You throw it on and hop in there. Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, then that's one of the deals that we drill in the academy so fast is getting your bunker gears on quick, how to set them up to where it's most, you know, inducive for you to get them on quick. So you're not fumbling with straps and stuff like that as you're putting them on. So we drill that a lot in the fire academy is how to get your bunker gear on quick.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So you take me through. You go to you're on the ambulance crew. You go to the you arrive at the scene. Exactly what are you doing there? Is there one person looking around? I guess is it if it's just an ambulance call? Is it just three of you or two of you? How many?
Two of us on the ambulance. Yeah. If it's
So
just
you
us going.
okay? Go ahead and take me to that scene. What you're looking at? What your kind of what your I guess situational awareness is, and then how you proceed to care for the patient.
Yeah. So generally what we do is we have what we call a lead and a driver. And so that'll, be different from station to station. We do 12 hours at ours. So when I'm on the ambulance with my partner, I'll run what we call lead for 12 hours, which is me making, the calls on the treatment and assessing the patient, doing the reports, and the driver medic being the one that does the skills, right? The IVs and giving medications and stuff like that. I'll make the calls of what I want done, and the driver will be the one doing those skills. And then they'll transport us to the hospital. And then usually the next 12 hours will switch. So some stations do 24 hours. They're like, hey, you're lead for the whole 24 hours this shift. But next time you're on the ambulance, you're going to be the driver medic for 24 hours. So
Is your partner on the ambulance the same partner all the time, or do you guys switch around?
now it moves around because we get, people call in sick, you get days off, vacations and stuff like that. So it's kind of a rotating basis. So we all end up working with each other at the same station. So we'll all end up riding with each other at some point throughout the month.
Have you ever gone to a situation where you're lead or you're the driver and you two disagree about the treatment?
It happens, yeah. So and that's
Describe
where
can bring me to one. Can you describe one specific instance where that happened?
so it's the one instance I can think of is like I said, interpreting 12 leads, taking a good look at the heart, and then you're reading the conduction of what's going on with the heart and what problems could be there. So it's an art, it's a science and an art at the same time of reading those 12 leads. And then I see one thing and I say, man, I think this is the medication and this is the route we should go. And my partner said, hey, well, I think it could be this, so I think we should go this route. The key thing whenever you have those disagreements on treatment modalities like that is that like I've worked with my partner and my partner's worked with me. We know each other's skill levels and knowledge level. And even though we may disagree, they were the driver medic at that point, and I was the lead medic at that point. So, hey, you know what? You're lead. This is your call. So I'm just letting you know this is what I think it is, but since you're lead, you get to make the call. And if this is what you want to do, then this is what we do. So it's really having that, bond with each other of, hey, I know this person's capable enough. We may disagree on the treatment modality, but they're capable enough and their knowledge is there where they can make that decision. So I'm going to go ahead and let them make that decision because it's their call right now. 12 hours from now, it might be their call and we might be in the same situation. And I'm going to have to let them make that call. And, I'm not going to let them harm a patient in any way. But if it's, both viable options and their lead, that's their call to make. And I'm going to go with them.
Have you had a situation where, I mean, there was a serious disagreement, perhaps harm of the patient you had to work through?
Never something that would cause harm to the patient, right? Luckily, our training for everybody that comes through is very good. So I've never had anybody, cause harm to a patient or anything like that, or them want to do a treatment that would cause more harm to a patient. So luckily, I've never been in that specific situation.
Do you know what the attrition rate is at the academy? So they make it through physically, but just can't handle the academics of the paramedic training?
So, and that's one of the things is they started doing years ago is they used to put people through fire school first, and then you come through paramedic. But they realize, hey, man, these people are failing out a paramedic because that's the tougher part of the job, like knowledge wise, that's the tougher part. So they started putting people through paramedic school first, and then when you make it through that, you'll go on to the fire part of it. And we really don't lose many because it's a 40-hour job for 'em, right? So you come in, you get hired with us, and you're a cadet. You're going to school Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's your whole job to learn paramedic for 12 months. And so, you're expected to be good at it. And I think we're lucky that most of them put in the work, right? Pretty much everybody puts in the work. We might lose one or two academy, people out of the academy, and that's an academy of 25 or so. So we might lose one or two people to failing out academic wise.
And that's, I guess, that's part of the written test. Is there? Do you know if there's an IQ component to the written test that so they're doing some selection that way
Yeah,
before
there's
for the
there's
application? Go ahead.
yeah, for the initial application process, there is. It's, a battery exam is what they call it. So it's got multiple different things on there from math and reading comprehension to, reading a map, right? It's giving you one-way streets and it says, hey, you're here. How do you get to there? And you need to know which way to go, which way you can't go on a one-way street, stuff like that.
So there is an element to that. In terms of the academy, you may not know these stats, but if can you think back to your class and how many of the candidates had bachelor's degrees or college education?
Yeah, college education was a decent amount. So we had probably, I was a class of 32. I was one of the bigger academies when we came through. And
Yeah.
we had at least 10 people probably with college education backgrounds, at least an associate's degree. We had a few with bachelor's. We had one guy with a master's degree in kinesiology.
So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, what you said is interesting. I remember. I don't know if this change has been made, but this was an issue for Air Force special operations for their pararescue guys, their PJs, because they go through selection and then they go through several different schools, and then the last school would be paramedic stuff. And they were having attrition at the paramedic stuff for academics. Guys weren't smart enough to pick up the info, and so they invested this thousands of dollars in time in these individuals, and they couldn't. They lost them to the academic stuff at the end. I don't know if they changed that around, but I remember speaking to a colonel in he was in the Air Force Special Operations. That was one of the things they were looking at. And so it's interesting that they're Corpus Christi, you do paramedics first. Do you know if that's done at other departments or maybe not? I assume, but
We're
maybe
we're
not.
one of the yeah, we're one of the few departments that makes everybody be a paramedic. Most departments, that's not a requirement. It's you need your EMT basic, which is a lot less schooling, a lot less knowledge. But to be a firefighter with us in Corpus, you have to be a paramedic, and we're one of the few departments in Texas that I know of that makes that a requirement.
Got it. You have you responded to many fentanyl calls?
It's hard to say definitively if I have or not because, it's I don't have the talk screen or anything like that to tell me if it was, but I can make good guesses based on the amount of Narcan it takes. I've given enough Narcan over my career to know, hey, this is a heroin overdose, and we gave the Narcan, the 2 mil, however much, and it woke him up versus, hey man, I just slammed 8 Narcans in this guy before he woke up. So that's not normal heroin or opiate. That's definitely got something to do with the fentanyl.
So take me through the responding to a case where someone has a drug overdose. Exactly what are you doing when you get there? Take me through that as detailed as possible.
Yeah, so the first thing you're doing when you get there is, like we would call in the fireground, a scene size up. Right. What's the house look like? Are there sketchy people hanging around? Are we going in the middle of the night to, an unsavory neighborhood or something where we got to watch out? So, and then coming up to the house, a lot of these houses are dilapidated. I've been in houses that are up on, cinder blocks. It has holes in the floor. The power's turned off, so you're going through there with a flashlight, making sure you don't fall through any holes in the floor. So you're kind of sizing up everything you've got going on around you, and then who all's on scene with you. So is it, people that are frantic and yelling and, freaking out that you need to remove from the scene? Well, hey, you have them back up so you can work on your patient? Or is it the dude that his buddy overdosed 6 times already and they kind of know the drill and he's like, hey, I ran out of Narcan. I just need y'all to give him some. So
Do
there's,
you You come into a house and it's, there's one person down, one of these drug houses, pretty obviously. There's six people hanging around. There's only two of you responding, right?
Generally, yeah. It's two of us. We have what we call notes. We have a computer in our ambulance that gives us dispatch notes, what the caller gave dispatch. So we can read some of those. And if we're reading, we're like, hey, we might need some extra personnel on this call. We can go ahead and call dispatch. Hey, attach me engine company or ladder company with this, or hey, go ahead and send PD out there.
To the
Most
police
of the time,
to come help you.
yeah,
You
most
ever
of the time
gotten
PD is going to respond with
Oh, really?
overdose calls.
Oh, they'll be there anyway. Do you have you ever been attacked?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You
Tell me
know,
about
it's
that specifically. Go into that. What specific instance of the case? What
so
happened?
it's excited delirium is what we call it, right? They're smoking whatever they're smoking, crack, PCP, some of the synthetic and stuff, and it just hypes them up. And so the call ended up being almost directly across the street from our station. So on those calls, they're going to send PD with us also. But being that it was such a close proximity to our station, we beat PD there. So, you always want to try and talk somebody down first, but when they're not acting in their right mind, they're not going to listen to you. So, yeah, I mean, the dude comes swinging, so we kind of just back up and give him some space and try and de-escalate the situation. PD finally got on scene, and we sedated him after PD subdued him. But at that point, we got to transport him. So we got him in the ambulance, and then I'm in the back, and that's a pretty confined area. Well, the sedation wore off, and he woke up swinging. So luckily I had another person back there because we knew it was combative patient. So we got his arms down, and we used some soft restraints, used some Coban, some Curlex to tie his arms down. And then the most important thing in that situation is that this guy might be swinging on you and wanting to cause you harm, but it's still your job to make sure he's okay, right? So you still got to assess his vitals, make sure he's doing good while all this is going on. So it's a balancing act of protecting yourself and making sure that patient's still doing okay.
Got it. So let's go back. Let's go back to the drug house. You come in there when you see someone an overdose. In your experience, is it mostly heroin?
A lot of times it is with those specific overdoses. Every now and then you'll make an intentional overdose, right? A suicide attempt or something like that, or they'll take something different. But majority of the times when we're getting called out to overdoses, it's usually going to be heroin or they've smoked some new synthetic or something that made them had a seizure and they passed out.
So you see an overdose case. You're thinking in your head is probably heroin. Go ahead and take me through how you respond to that and how do you assess it and then how you treat it.
So pretty much when we walk up to an unconscious patient, we use what we call CAB, right? Circulation, airway, and breathing. So first thing you want to do is make sure, hey, check his pulse, make sure, he's got a pulse and he's not dead. So we're not working a CPR call at this point. And then with heroin and opiate overdoses, you'll see real shallow breathing. So they'll be breathing slow and shallow. So that's a pretty key indicator. And then their pupils are generally pinpoint. So those are all things you want to check right off the bat to kind of get an idea of what kind of medications they're on. If you see the shallow breathing, the unconscious, and the pinpoint pupils, you can pretty safely assume it's an opiate. And the good thing is that Narcan doesn't really have any what we call contraindications, any reason you can't give it. So I can give the Narcan without any worries that it's going to interact with something else and cause an adverse effect.
What is the Narcan delivery system?
So we have two different ways to deliver it. We have what we call a MAD device. It's a mucosal atomizer. So it's a little cone and we put it up their nose and it actually sprays and atomizes up their nose. And that's kind of a slower intake than if we start an IV and give it through an IV. Generally, we try and give it through an IV. That way it has that faster uptake. And if we need to give more doses, it's a little bit more effective.
I assume that atomizer is like a single use type of thing.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah, so
pretty
you
much
use it and then if
everything.
you go ahead.
Yeah, pretty much everything we use in the medical world is a single use and it's done.
Right.
That keeps it all sterile.
How are you protecting yourself from fentanyl poisoning?
It's really not as big of an issue as it seems to be made out to be. You know, a lot of people are concerned about, oh my, I touched my hands like I'm gonna overdose or something like that. The amount of fentanyl that it would take, you know, dust in the air or something like that without you actively ingesting it, it's gonna take, a fentanyl lab almost in order for you to overdose on something like that. So unless you're, actively rubbing it in your eyes or something like that, then it's not really as big as an issue as most of it's made out to be, as far as
You're
I've
just wearing
seen.
you're just wearing gloves and a mask when you respond. Then are you wearing a mask?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on most calls, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Say that again.
Yeah, on most of those calls, I'll be wearing a mask.
Okay. Has there any has there been any instances of fentanyl poisoning in your department that you're aware of from firefighters?
No, none that I'm aware of.
We hear a lot about the opioid stuff. When you respond to these calls, have you been surprised that some of the people have been overdosed on opioids? I mean, not what you expect, like a call to a fancy house on the outskirts in the a soccer mom or something like that.
Oh yeah, there's no discrimination when it comes to that kind of stuff. You'll make every socioeconomic level of person with that kind of call. It's all over the place. It might be more prevalent in the lower income, but it's not like you're not going to make it on the higher income either.
You're stationed in a rough part of the town.
Not anymore, no. My station previously was, on a little bit lower income side of town, but as of now, we got a pretty actually weird split, right? We say which way are we turning out of the station, right? If we're turning right, we're going to one side of town that's, a little bit worse off, and if we're turning left, we're going over to the more high dollar side of town. So we've got a pretty good split in our territory of, you know, wealth disparity, I guess.
Speaking of that police officer I mentioned before, he found that the job was changing him. He became a lot less trustful of people, quick to judge, quick to anger. He had to actually, take a step back, and it's one of the reasons he went to the SWAT team. He saw the patrol work kind of grinding him down. Does that happen to you as a firefighter when you're dealing with, like you said, a lot of the same people, same type of people, sometimes the exact same people again and again and again? Have you seen that similar thing happen to you or anybody you've worked with?
Yeah, it definitely happens, and I would like to say it hasn't happened to me. The reality it probably has, and I don't notice it. But you make these calls on whether it be homeless people or something like that, or these people that are doing drugs and hanging out, and you get to recognize them, and it kind of puts a bad taste in your mouth, right? So if I used to give the guy on the corner $5 before I got this job, I see that guy in the corner now, I'm like, oh dude, I just picked you up the other day because you were stealing from the gas station, and then you cussed me out and I tried to take your vitals. So it happens for sure.
Have you ever had an instance of PTSD or something like that where you arrived on the scene and it impacted you and you felt it at home or you couldn't let it go? I can't remember who I interviewed recently or spoken to. And, the instance was a kid. They responded I think it was a police officer responded to a tragic incident. I can't remember the details, but it was a child, and the child was about the same age as their child, and it stuck with them. They thought they were hard until they kind of saw that. Has any of that happened to you that you know of or you remember?
Yeah, and it's pediatric calls, right? Making calls on kids, that's always tough, because it's our jobs. We go to all of them, right? So we've made pediatric CPR calls before where this kid's not breathing, doesn't have a pulse, and we're working CPR on them, and that's tough for everybody involved. I definitely see it a lot harder with the people that have kids, especially like I said, they got kids similar age or something like that. It hits them a lot harder, but it's definitely not easy on anybody. Our department we're lucky enough to have them recognize that, and we have what we call a CISM afterwards usually, and we'll get the crew that worked that call, and it's a critical
What's that acronym stand for?
So critical incident stress management. So it's usually something we'll go out of service after that call. And then we have guys in the department that are qualified to come and just, It's kind of just an open dialogue. Hey, how's everybody feel after that? Is everybody feeling okay? Do y'all need to talk about anything? Do we need to address anything that's going on after that call? And I feel like that's been very helpful for all the guys out there. But those pediatric calls are it's going to be tough on everybody.
So for one of those, when you bring in that, when you go, so you go off call and then a team comes in, are those situations decided by the type of call, the battalion, or is your captain making that, or who decides when that happens?
Yeah, generally, so on a call like that, the battalion's going to hear it on the radio and he's going to make that decision, or the captain can make that decision. He can call the battalion chief and like, hey, look, my guys just made a really bad call, and I think they might need some time to talk about it or go over it and digest it. So they're usually the chiefs are very understanding of that kind of stuff because, they've all risen through the ranks, right? So our battalion chiefs have been every rank moving up, right? You can't just start skipping over stuff. So they were all riding the ambulance at one point or on the fire truck and they'd made those calls. And so they realized the need for that. So if a captain calls and said, hey, look, my guys just made, you know, a shooting on a family friend or something. I think they need some time to do the CISM. It might not be the pediatric call that we normally do them for, but this is a call that affected somebody and that chiefs are usually pretty open to that.
So is it automatic for pediatric calls usually?
Yeah, usually if it's a pediatric CPR call. If it's just, a pediatric seizure or, sick call, we're just kind of taking a kid to the hospital. That's, just kind of what we do. But if it's a CPR call on a pediatric patient, then it's pretty much an automatic.
How many lives have you saved?
I have no idea. I wouldn't begin to tell you. I mean, we work CPR calls, more than a few times a month, depending on where you're going that day. But we had a CPR call last shift, and we ended up getting that guy back. So that's always one of the best feelings is whenever you're, working on the ambulance, you got a CPR in progress, and you're doing it, and then you end up getting them back, right, and they end up surviving. So that's one thing I wish our hospitals would be better about. They've set up a pretty good system as far as us reaching out to them and hey, how did my patient do? I brought this guy in. What was the outcome? So I wish there was a little bit easier pipeline to get that information because a lot of times we take people when we drop them off at the hospital and we don't know what the outcome was. We don't know if they made it, they got diagnosed with something different than we saw. So it'd be nice to have a better pipeline to the hospital for them to let us know, hey, look, you brought this patient in and they improved, they're doing better, they got this going on, and we discharged them.
Is there any CPR call that you responded to that stands out that you remember, like you're maybe one when you're early in your career or for another reason?
There's one that stands out to me just for odd reasons, kind of. And it's one of those ones I wish I could follow up on. As a guy, it's been a while back, but we made him and he was in his early 20s inside his
What was
house.
the incident? Do you know?
I don't. So we got a call that the guy was not conscious and not breathing, and it was probably 7 a.m. in the morning. And we go over there, and he lives in an apartment. Apartment's locked. We make entry, and we get there. He's not conscious, not breathing, no pulse. We work it, but we don't know who called, which was one of the weird ones. He was a young guy. He was fairly fit, no medical history that we could determine. So I'm not, that's one of the ones that stuck to me. Well, what happened here? Who called? Why did this guy go down? It was just a very odd situation that I wish I had some more answers to.
So the apartment was blocked. You mean it? What do you mean it was blocked?
Locked. I'm sorry.
Oh, it was locked.
Yeah, it was locked up. So we had to force entry through the door.
So no obvious sign of drug overdose.
No, nothing. I said it. I mean, and we
No
did a
like
pretty
blunt
thorough.
trauma to the head or anything like that. Wow.
No, yeah, it was one of those calls where it kind of stuck with me. I still think about it to this day and try and go back and relive the scene in my mind and what was going on that made this happen. And I wish I had a little bit more answers.
Describe the best paramedic you've worked for.
That's a tough one. We have a lot of good medics, but probably the best medic I ever worked with is a guy that never stopped learning, right? So he's been a medic for 20 years close to. He hasn't promoted out of the EMS2 position where a lot of guys do, right? It's like a saying in our department is, if you don't like riding the ambulance, promote up to a captain or a driver. We don't have to. But he loves the job and he's good at it. He's never stopped learning about the job, and his attitude has remained great throughout everything. He's been at some of the busiest stations. He's ran critical calls, and he's taught me a lot about how to interact with people.
Have you run a call with him before?
Yeah, multiple.
So can you describe some specifics on, like you said, how he interacts with people, or where you've just seen him do something and go, wow, that was amazing.
So it's a lot of what we do is what I like to call bedside manner, right?
Okay, go ahead.
So you could have the smartest, best paramedic in the world, but if you don't know how to talk to somebody, then it's not going to be a smooth, good call. You've got to have that personability, that ability to interact with people. And so I've seen him talk, you know, like those excited delirium patients, that most people can't get through because they're not in their right mind or something. And he'll talk those people down. It's just he's got a way of just helping people by just talking to them, and it's really impressive to watch.
What does he look like? Describe him. Does he stand out anyway? Does he have like a kind face or a big smile or anything like that stands out?
Not real. I mean, he's a pretty big dude. He's probably, I mean, big to me. He's 6'2", probably, close to 200. He's probably early 50s by now. But yeah, I mean, it's just normal looking
It's good.
guy, but it's just something about the way he talks and, his ability to talk to people that
Is that something they teach you at the academy? Is that bedside manner stuff? Or you had to pick that up on the job?
you kind of pick it up on the job. I help teach paramedic at the academy, so that's one of the big things I try and help people. You recognize it real fast, the people that can and the people that can't. Whenever I run
How
their
do you
patient
recognize it?
assessments,
How do you recognize it real fast?
so it's well, we run through what we call like scenarios or patient assessments, where I'll have one of the other cadets or somebody be a patient, and I'll have them interact with them, and you can just tell that they've got a I expect it kind of at the beginning where they're just like on script and they're very robotic and they're asking their questions. But a lot of them by the second or third month, they kind of break out of that and they get to the, well, hey, how are you doing? Tell me what's going on. And they get a little bit more personable as they're doing things. And throughout the academy, they periodically come and they ride on the ambulance with us instead of going to the academy. So I'll get to see how they interact with real patients on the ambulance as they go through the academy and try to give them some feedback there. Some people are just real robotic in the way they talk. It's something that we've got to work on. And I've seen a lot of people break out of their shell through time and become really good at it.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but I assume you've responded to some pretty bloody scenes. When you first saw that, maybe earlier in a career, or maybe still, I imagine you get excited, or not excited in a good way, but just shocked maybe would be the answer. And then you got to work through that, obviously, get calm really fast, and then you start doing your job. Did you find, I guess, in terms of your career, that responding to something like that you were naturally able to get to the job and set those feelings aside, or is it something you've had to work through over the years as you improved and grown as a paramedic?
I think it's something that I've had at, some degree since the beginning of doing all this, but it's definitely come more, more prevalent as time has gone on, and I've got more experience under my belt. I was lucky enough when I was a brand new firefighter paramedic to go to one of the, busiest three stations in our city and make a lot of those calls really early on. And so it was, trial by fire, like, hey, you got to get good at this because, you're doing this all the time, multiple times a shift. So I think that's really beneficial is kind of that trial by fire, get new, get out there and, you know, get your feet wet and get in it. And so that's helped me progress, along those lines of making those decisions, calming myself, calming other crew members or what have you.
Right. So you've just the early exposure, lots of reps. Is that common, or were you just fortunate early in your career to get sent to one of those stations?
I was fortunate. for how long I was there. So generally they try and rotate new guys every 6 months or so through busy stations like that. I was fortunate enough to be there and then spend my first 3 years there. So I was just, I'm lucky one that didn't get moved out of that station. I lucked into that role and then got to stay there.
Interesting. In terms of the your tactical medic team, also, am I correct? On
Yes.
Are you part of the SWAT team? Do you respond to SWAT with the SWAT team?
Yes. Yeah, that is my most recent role that I've obtained.
And you had to select for that, right? You had to go through selection,
I
or
did.
did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had to. Was it? Did you jump into the regular selection for the SWAT team? Well, I guess take a step back. Does Corpus have a full time SWAT team, or are they part time guys?
Part-time guys.
Okay. And did you do a special selection for medics, or did you have to go through the regular SWAT selection?
So I went through SWAT selection for 2 years. We only had for medics, all of our SWAT medics are come from the fire side and we integrate with the PD on the SWAT side. So we have a select group. We have 4 guys per shift that from the fire department that are SWAT medics. So those selections only come up when there's an opening. So one year a guy retired. He wasn't even on my shift, but they opened up that selection to everybody. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do. So I know I can't get the spot because it's not my shift, but I want to go through. I want to see what it's about. I want to put my face out there and get to it. So we did that year. We did a different selection process than the year that I got on, which was last year. And so this last year we did basically the same selection qualifications that the PD side does, which is it's going to be a 250-meter row followed by a 10-yard, 90-pound sled push, and then you do 10 calories on an assault bike. And then after that, PD does they'll fire 5 rounds with their handgun. Instead of doing that, we don't carry as medics. So instead of doing the firearms part, we'll go and we'll do tourniquet drills. So we'll put 2 tourniquets on a patient, and you've got to do all that in under 3 minutes.
And is that like initial gate assessment, and then if you pass that assessment, you go on to a longer, like 2 day selection event, or is that? Go ahead. How does that work?
Yeah, so that's the first thing is your physical, right? You're going to do that physical, and that's pass or fail. You pass that, you're going to move on to a oral interview with the guys on the team. So you'll go through oral interview with the guys on the team, and then they'll make their decisions and their rankings of where everybody fell on that list. And then essentially after that, you get the call, hey, you're on the team. All right, cool. And then once you're on the team, you've got a 1 year probationary term on the team. So during that year, you're the new guy. You're doing all the new guy stuff, right? You're carrying everybody's bags. You're doing all the stuff, and you're putting in the most work possible at that point. And then at some point through that year, you'll get sent to SWAT school, and then that's where most of your training comes through from that class. So we do monthly trainings also, but
So you
your
do
main trainings,
a monthly training with the SWAT team. You'll get together for a
yes,
day or 2 days a month,
yes.
and then tell me about SWAT school. Is that a certain period, a longer period? Do they send you away? Tell me about SWAT school.
Yeah, so we in our department we go down to Brownsville, so a couple hours away, and that's a week long school.
What is it? What do you learn?
That's
Is
the
it for
PD
medics
side.
specifically, or is it just general? Go ahead.
So that's actually for the PD side. So
Okay.
you go down there, and when you go down to that SWAT school, you're not a medic. You're you're a SWAT team guy, right? You're expected to shoot, move, do everything that the regular PD guys do. I was fortunate enough to right after I got on that we went to a specific SWAT medic school up near Austin, and that was just for the medics. And we got to go up there. We got to learn some, combat casualty care. We got to, get off the X and work on medic specific stuff. And at that point,
So at the SWAT school there in Brownsville, then that was just doing the. Did you? I guess I'm assuming you did some shooting stuff before you went to that school with the team and their training.
I haven't even been to that one yet in
Oh,
Brownsville.
really?
Yeah, I'm slated to go in May. So
Oh, so that's exciting. Are you doing some shooting now?
I am, yes. Yeah, I've been super fortunate. The guys on the team on the PD side are so knowledgeable, and they're really welcoming to medics, which I think is very fortunate because talking to other medics around the state, not everybody's as receptive to these guys coming in like we are. And so
Hmm.
they've been really good with working on me, working on my shooting and stuff like that on our range days.
So, what is the difference between a regular medic and a tactical medic, other than you're all geared up and kit for the tactical side?
Yeah, so at this point, it's mostly how we respond and then the type of thinking that goes into it, right? On an ambulance call, or you're a regular medic, you're going in there, hey, this person's got something wrong. You're going to diagnose it and you're going to figure out kind of what's going on, what medications can you do, what interventions can you do to help them. As far as on the tactical side, you've got environmental threats going on, whether it's an active shooter or something like that. And it's, the quickest life safety thing you can do, whether that's throw a tourniquet on or something like that, get them off the X, and then deal with the trauma of that afterwards.
So, is your primary patient care then as a tactical medic for the other team members? I assume, but am I wrong?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the team members come first, and then once the scene is secure, everybody's safe, they've cleared the house, whatever they're doing. If we have a patient at that point, I can take over a patient, but I stick with the team, and they are my primary care until everything is cleared and they're all safe.
You at that school in Austin for tactical medics. You'd mentioned combat medicine. So, what did you learn at that school? I guess. Did you learn how to, you know, focus training on gunshot wounds, explosion wounds, that type of stuff, or what was the difference at the school? Go ahead.
Yeah, so it was a lot of quick care, quick triage. So getting them off the X, getting them to a safe spot, and then it's a lot of trauma medicine for that. Yeah, we focused a lot on dealing with gunshot wounds, blast injuries, working advanced airways such as like a cricothyrotomy. So putting a cric into somebody, which is something that we don't do on the regular medic side on the ambulance, and then needle decompressions, stuff like that. We went over canine care because we have guys on the team with canines. So we got to go over, canine medicine, dosages for that, how to treat a canine. And it's a lot more trauma intensive than on the regular medic side where you're a lot more medical and, medication wise.
For your SWAT team there in Corpus, are most of the calls urban? Is it CQB work, or are there some rural calls too where you'll need to ruck in someplace, something like that?
Majority so far for me have been urban calls. Yeah. There's definitely the possibility the you know the rural places. That's 100% a possibility. But so far through my experience, it's been mostly urban.
How big is the SWAT team?
27, I believe, people.
And so you said there's a tactical medic per shift, or four tactical. How many medics? So if the SWAT team is called right now, how many medics are showing up with them? And so you've got your SWAT gear at your station with you, right? If you're on call.
I have my SWAT gear at home with me. So we're on call our first day off. So
So you can't be called for a SWAT. You can't go on a SWAT call when you're at the station. Then only if you're, like you said, your first day off. Go ahead. Am I right?
right, yeah, because that would have to pull me off an ambulance or pull me off a fire truck or something like that. So we work our first day off on call.
Right. Is it it's just at your home? Do you have in a vehicle ready to go to drive, or how does that work in terms of your gear?
Yeah, I've got it all packaged up. It's ready to go. So I'll respond in my POV if we have a SWAT call out on
Got it.
something that's not like a pre-planned warrant or something. If it's something that just pops off at a moment's notice, I've got everything packed up and ready to go, and I'll roll POV to whatever the scene is, and then get with command and stack up with somebody.
You said you're really excited to become a tactical medic. Why?
It's there's a couple reasons, but I've noticed that as I tried to progress and better myself, I was surrounding myself with guys that were doing the same thing. And before I got on this team, I had noticed that the guys I was surrounding myself were the guys on this team, right? They were the guys that were, you know, do top, peak performance. They were progressing like other people weren't. And then so, that really gave me the drive to do better. And I think that was one of the biggest things was when I got on the team, I didn't want to get on the team necessarily to better myself, even though I know that was going to be a byproduct. I wanted to become much of an asset to the team as possible. So I went through and I did a lot of work on my own, getting, T Triple C and all that stuff on my own time, paying for it out of my pocket and trying to work hard to become, on this team with these guys so I could get to that point to where, I'm progressing farther and farther within my knowledge and my career and my performance.
So in terms of that knowledge, are you talking advanced paramedic techniques, or there's other type of knowledge that you paid for and got on your own?
Yeah, so mostly it's what I was able to go get on my own, right? There's some limitations whenever you're not going through a department, whenever you're doing it on your own. There's some limitations of what you can go do, what classes you can take, and stuff like that are open to you. So the TCCC, the TECC, Tactical Emergency Combat Care, was basically the limit I could do, and then getting FaceTime with these guys that were on the team, right? Hanging out with them. Hey guys, can I come help y'all do this? Like, I don't need to get paid for it, right? I'll come. I'll carry y'all's bags. Like, let me some FaceTime with y'all. See what we can do.
We did a study. We've done actually a lot of work over the years. Fitness cultures at first responder units. Most aren't that impressive. You applied to be on our athlete team, and you had described that you've been doing MTI programming for a long time, and you actually got some of the guys of your crew to do some of our programming. Yeah, you were definitely high school athlete. As you moved out of high school, when you were mechanicing and applying all those years to the fire department, did you keep training?
I did. When I was before I decided I wanted to go to the fire department, my athletic training was basically skateboarding and surfing, which is good in its own right, but it's not, like mission focused, right? And so as I went on and I started applying, I started working a more direct approach of working out and training for this job. And as I've gone into this job and had more years on the job, I realized how important that direct focus of training for the job you have is, because you got guys out here that are huge, they lift heavy weights, they're jacked, but they'll gas out in a fire 5 minutes in because they didn't train for it, or they don't train in gear, or they have these extra stresses on them that they don't normally have when you go to the gym and just lift weights.
How was the fitness culture in the department? I mean, I guess from an organizational perspective, does your station have training equipment there at the station? Do you have room to train at your station? Do you have like a little training room where you got gear set up?
Yeah, so our department's very good about providing gym equipment to the stations. And so we used to have, it was essentially a closet. And we had a little cable machine in there and, a bench for bench press. And that was really it. And we kind of got on them when we moved into the station a couple years ago. We're like, hey guys, like we need more room, more equipment, stuff to train with. And so eventually, as time has gone on, we've moved all of our equipment into our bay. So we've got it basically in the garage, and we've got mats down, we've got cable machines, we've got, boxes, sandbags, stair climbers. So we have a decent gym set up. We like it a lot, the way we have it set up. And that's me personally. I hate working out inside. So I love that we've been able to move it outside and work out in the elements, because that's one of the other thing is it's 105 degrees, 110 degrees down here in the summer. So if you're not subjecting yourself to working in those elements, when it comes down to going on scene and trying to work out in that heat, you're not going to be acclimated to it.
Right. Yeah. Is the do you get time on duty to train, or is that on your own? I assume that it's there. So you're trying to find time during your duty days to throw a session in. But do you get specific time cut out for that, or is it just on everybody's up to every individual firefighter?
It's generally up to every individual firefighter. So our station, I've been fortunate with the people I work with that we're all pretty, fitness focused, and it's been a good crew to work out with. We all kind of have different functionalities that we work out. The female on our team is actually, national level baseball player for Team USA. So she trains a lot of that kind of stuff, works a lot around that sport along with working for the job. I've got two former Marines at my station that work out with me, and we're we tried the Big Cat series and worked on that. Our engineer is 66 years old and benches 225 like it's nothing. He's very weight focused on his, and our captain does a really good job of getting out there with us, and he's really trains his functionality for our ladder company, working on the stair climber and working on his cardio as long with the weights. He was a gymnast back in, his college days, so he's all about the calisthenics and stuff.
Do you is there a fitness assessment for your department? An annual fitness assessment? It's a high jeopardy. In other words, you if you don't pass it, there's job implications.
Nope, not at all.
There's no annual fitness assessment. Are there a lot of or many obese firefighters in the department?
There's not many, but there are the few, right? There's a decent percentage that don't put a priority on their fitness, unfortunately. But we have a I've seen the culture change over the past few years of, the newer people coming out, putting a big emphasis on the fitness and their ability to do this job. And, some of the older guys don't have that same drive anymore. So they're not as fit as I think they should be. But what we do have is recently implemented was a fit for duty test. So if you go on light duty, your operations, you're in the field working the shift schedule and you get hurt or something. And you go on light duty and you're there for 3 months where you're going to do a fit for duty test before you come back. So you're going to go on air, you're going to do a consumption drill of your air bottle. They're going to put you through a live burn at the training academy. They're going to make you pull hose lines, and you've got to pass that to be able to come back. So I think we're moving in the right direction with those kinds of things. But there at this point, there's not a yearly fitness test, anything, a standard for everybody once you get out.
Right. You tell me about the meals at the station on duty. Do you guys all go to the grocery store yourselves and everybody, cooks, the team cooks for themselves? Is that how that works?
So no, and that's one of the things I love about my station is, like I said, the camaraderie that we have. So we call it family time. Right? So we all take turns cooking, and you cook for the station. So, a couple times a month, I got to cook for the 5 guys at my station. And so we all take turns cooking. You don't ever cook if you're on the ambulance because you're so busy, you're not going to be able to stay there and cook. But, whenever it's your time on the ladder, we all take turns. We have a running list of whose turn it is. Like, I got to cook tomorrow. All right, so I'll be cooking at the station tomorrow. But yeah, so we all cut in 3 meals. We eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at our station, and we all take turns cooking and eating together.
What are you gonna cook? Do you cook all 3 meals tomorrow, or just get one of them?
All three. Yeah, when it's your turn to cook, you're up for all three.
Okay, yeah,
So yeah, usually in the morning I try and keep it fairly simple just because we got rig checks, we got station cleanup, we got stuff to do. So usually in the morning it's bacon, beans, scrambled eggs, something real quick. And then for dinner, it's Texas, so I like to do tacos. We do pastor tacos for lunch is one of my big things with some homemade salsa and chips. And then at dinner, I do a chicken with a Tuscan gravy, some rolls, and some rice for everybody.
are you a foodie, or is there like competition to outcook the other guys at the station? Is it competitive?
Not at our station. Everybody's got their like couple meals that we know everybody likes, so we kind of stick to that rotation.
Got it, yeah.
But it's always interesting when you get a brand new guy, somebody still on probation, and it's their turn to cook, and they're like 20 years old, and they're like, I've never cooked for anybody. You
Right, right,
know, they're cooking medium rare chicken, and you got to kind of coach them in that aspect.
right. So outside of work now, do you have another job? Do you have a second job, or is your SWAT time? I mean, you're on duty now, right? You're on call right now for SWAT, so I mean, it's not like you can have a second job, or can you? I know a lot of firefighters, who are able to pick up second jobs and start their own businesses when they're off duty.
Yeah, so right now, on my days off, I'm on call for SWAT, and I also work as the paramedic instructor for our academy. So that's actually on my days off that I do that. And so, like this whole month, I'm doing a field training with one of the paramedics. They're about to finish up their training program. So I'll be out there. I work every single day this coming week, whether it's on duty with the department, on SWAT training, or if I'm riding an ambulance doing field training with the new paramedic.
Got it. being an instructor, I always find I learn so much when I have to teach. Has it been your experience too? Has teaching just made you a better paramedic? Is there anything that and if so, is there something that you thought you knew that when you started teaching it, you learned a lot more about?
Yeah, it's it's interesting because you teach, as they come in, they don't, they have no medical background. They don't have any paramedic, you know, knowledge. And as you're teaching them and you go through things, they start asking these questions, and you're like, wow, I've never thought of that question in my life. I don't know the answer. I'm going to have to look that up. I'll get back to you. And so it's interesting the kind of questions you get, and like I said, cardiology. Being able to read heart rhythms is one of the things that is ever evolving to me. Seeing different heart rhythms and like, well, hey, why is that conduction doing that? And going over that with those students. I really enjoy teaching the trauma stuff from what I learned on the SWAT side, but the cardiology is something that seems like that I'm always learning something about.
If there was one policy change that you'd make at your department, if you were the chief of the department, what would it be?
I think fitness standards is a huge one as far as department wide goes. So even we've brought this up before, and I've talked to people about it, but even a non-punitive. So hey, you do this, you have this fitness standard. If you meet this fitness standard, hey, cool, you'll get 12 hours of vacation leave added to your bank. And if you don't pass it, cool, we'll work on a program with you. And then next year when it comes around, if you've made the progress and you pass it again, cool, you get your 12 hours. But if you don't, hey, we're going to work this program with you again until you get better. But at this point, I think it's kind of crazy in a job that can kill you for not being fit, that there is no fitness standard once you get turned to the field.
Is your department unionized?
It is.
I've done a lot of work on that and union opposition to fitness standards, and then also the legacy members. So the older people who don't want to, they never had to do it. They don't want to have to start. Yeah, and it's interesting because it can be a source of resentment from guys like you who are fit and make it a priority to see unfit guys. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons where, like you described, that you kind of end up gravitating towards like-minded, firefighters who had a combination of training for the job, understand how fitness is important, and that kind of transfers over to how they go about their work too. They're professional about all elements of their job. The idea of non-punitive is interesting. The high jeopardy, where there is a punitive element to it, is really difficult to get through unions, and it's any first responder unit. I mean, there's so many lawsuits that have been filed which have eliminated high jeopardy fitness assessments. High jeopardy means there's a job impact. Either you lose your job, you're putting up probation, you lose money, or whatever if you don't pass it. At both all types of first responder units, I've thought of doing a deal where you require a fitness assessment and just publish the results for everybody. And just kind of use, the community, where all of a sudden guys you do poorly on it start getting looked at. Have you seen the article I wrote about, I think it's titled like Firemen and Police Officers, How Come You Tolerate Unfit First Responders? Have you seen that
I
article?
don't
I'll have
think
to
I've read
send that
that
to you.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty famous. It's been written a while ago. Obviously, if you there was this case. It's kind of a case that came on my radar because I knew one of the individuals involved. This is in Texas, I think. Obese firefighter went down in one of them shitty small house fires, and he died. I think one of the guys trying to drag his 300-pound butt out died, and another guy was severely injured. And so someone who's fit like that or isn't fit can get you killed, right? So I'm always wonder how come, you tolerate that. I think there's some self-selection where if it does drive you crazy, you end up moving to a more active station or around guys you are the same like you are, right? But what does that mean for the guys who are stuck with these individuals at some of these slower stations? But that'd be the first step, just to publish that. And then there has to be some, generally I can't tell you how many emails or phone calls I've had with individuals just like you, these first responder units who want to get fitness started, and they aren't getting anywhere with their command. And it sounds like my answer to them is always, you don't need your command to do it. You can do like you guys did. There's plenty of stations where guys bring in their own equipment, but they just start doing it at the station, and it builds and builds. And like you said, your current station, I don't know, I'm assuming, but the Marines or whatever who are former Marines who kind of saw you train and say, hey, what are you doing? And pretty soon you convince them to come in and start training with you. It does get kind of contagious, and then you kind of attract these guys. So there's plenty that individuals can do without the command support, which is going to be difficult either because of funding and or union. I mean, I tell guys now, don't even bother trying to get a high jeopardy fitness standard. But something like you're talking about, it seems like this fit for service is a first step. Why isn't that fit for service, done for everybody, once a year, all of a sudden, to identify the guys, see what I mean? But that might be the next step. But there seems like there's jeopardy for that, because if you're not fit for service, then you can't go on the job, right? And so there might be union resistance to it. It's an interesting, almost a tragic sometimes, reality of working with first responder units. And we did a study one time, or I did just kind of a study on my own, where I took a look at what type of units had first responder units had high jeopardy fitness assessments. And there are more actual fire departments across the nation who have high jeopardy fitness assessments than police departments. But still, it's not the norm. And I think it's going away. It's difficult to get through. I mean, just to get an assessment that survives legal scrutiny is difficult. And for example, if you have a pull-up standard and you have women on your force, and many of the women can't meet the pull-up standard, in the Army, they had their new fitness assessment. They had this thing called a leg tuck, where you had to like bring your legs up for as a core strength exercise, replace the sit-ups. And women had more difficulty doing it than men, and the numbers were so dramatic that there was allegation of bias in the fitness assessment, and so that event was dropped. That happens all the time, that kind of stuff, and it's almost not worth the trouble. I think there definitely are ways that you can do it, and just like that's why I tell guys like you, is just get some equipment. Get it in there, start training. There's never an equipment excuse for not training hard. I mean, I could design a pretty, fucking incredible program for firefighters with a sandbag and a step-up box, right?
That's that.
Or I wouldn't even need a step-up box. I could just do a sandbag and your sprinting space. And yes, equipment is never an excuse, but it certainly helps. And anyway, I don't need to lecture you, but I'm pretty familiar with these worlds. What do you do? Are you outside? Do you do any? I mean, you're down in Corpus. I mean, but you did mention that hiking and stuff. You got to do. What are your outdoor sports? Is it still
Yeah,
surfing, skating?
so surfing when I get the chance. Like I said, it's kind of difficult to get out there sometimes, but what I do make time for every year through one of my vacations is going somewhere for a camping trip. I've learned to love backcountry camping for the past few years, and so
Is that
every
like?
year
Is that backpacking, or is that?
yeah.
Did you go backpacking? Oh yeah, go. Where do you go? What have you been doing?
So Pedernales Falls was my last one. It's kind of tough in Corpus because there's not a lot of places to go hiking or anything in Corpus. We're really flat, a lot of farm fields, a lot of beach, stuff like that. So it usually involves, driving a few hours at least up north to go somewhere in the hill country to do stuff like that. But at least once a year, I try and make it a point to go for backpacking for a few days somewhere at one of the state parks or go somewhere like that.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to get outside for sure. Do you do any fishing there in Corpus?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the thing for Corpus, man. If you come down here, even if you don't like fishing, you're gonna go fishing. We have really good saltwater fishing, so I like to go kayak fishing.
Yeah, really. What kind of? Do you have like a Hobie kayak?
No, I wish I got a little pescador. It's a little cheap 12-foot kayak, stand up kayak, but it gets the job done. So
So
my
you're
uncles have Hobies and all that.
are you targeting redfish? What kind of fish are you targeting?
Yeah, redfish and trout mostly.
So are you fly fishing? Are you casting? What do you do it?
Yeah, casting. I've got a couple guys in the fire department that have tried to get me into fly fishing, and I just haven't dove in yet. Haven't taken the leap to try and get into that.
Yeah. How often do you go?
Not as often I'd like, but probably once a month or so.
What's the biggest redfish you caught?
I don't even know. I like to go fishing. I never said I was a good fisherman. So I'll be honest, it's been a while since I even caught a fish, but it's nice to get out there, right? That's
So you suck at fishing. Got it.
I do, yeah.
I've
I
never.
will not deny that.
Yeah, I love saltwater fishing. But I've never targeted redfish before. And so I'm curious. I've just seen plenty of YouTube videos. Looks interesting.
Yeah,
I've done some fishing for sea trout. And good tasting, for sure.
yeah.
But yeah, redfish is different for sure. Good for you. Any question about your job? That I should have asked that I didn't.
No, I mean, I think we've gone through it pretty thorough. It's like I said, it's the best job in the world, regardless of what anybody says or thinks about it, whatever the burnout rate is, between sleep deprivation and all that. You can always see the downsides of any job. But bottom line is, at the end of the day, this is the best job in the world, and I love it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else at this point.
So we got some rapid fire questions for you. Most challenging type of call to respond to.
Mass casualty incidences, for sure. So when you got multiple patients, you got to start that triage process. That who's the most critical, who's got to go first, right? Because then you got to make the decisions of, hey, I've got 8 hurt people here, and I've got to decide which one gets care first. So that's always a difficult call to make.
So, I mean, have you responded to an airplane crash, or are we talking like a tragic fire, many incidents, or is it like a multi-vehicle car crash? Describe me as best you can. Tell me about one of these instances you responded to.
Yeah, the most recent one was a multi-vehicle car crash, and one of the cars ended up flipping over onto its roof. And it was a sedan that was packed full of, younger kids between 17 and, 20 years old. And we had 6 or 7 of them in that car, plus the 3 patients that were in the other car. So now you've got to look at all these patients that are, in the roadway, and it's like, all right, who's got the most serious injuries? We've got multiple medic units on the way, but some of them are coming from across town. So you've got to sit there, you've got to assess, and who needs the trauma surgeon the fastest. And then so you've got to kind of separate those, and as guys come on scene, direct them which patient. Hey man, look, you got to start providing patient care for this guy because this other guy's got to go. So you're gonna have to wait on the ambulance for that guy. So stabilize them, do the best you can until that next ambulance gets here.
Were you the first unit to respond to that?
We were the second unit to respond to that. The first ambulance, but the
Oh, you were
second
the
unit.
first ambulance, though.
Yeah.
Were you the driver, or were you the I forget which position you called. If you're not driving the ambulance, what's the other position? The leader of
The
that?
lead medic.
Yeah, were you the lead medic then?
So I was the driver on that call actually.
Okay. Did the lead medic was that person automatically kind of the incident commander because he or she was first on scene?
Yeah, generally they would be, but we were the first ambulance on scene. So there was our engine company on scene. So
Got it.
that officer, that captain, was the incident command for that, and he was, assessing the scene and trying to decide how many more resources he needed. So that triage process kind of fell onto us as the ambulance crew, and I actually stayed him back, and I had one of the guys that rides tailboard on the engine drive our ambulance to the hospital, and I stayed him back to do patient care after we got ambulances on scene and passed off triage to the battalion chief.
How long were you on scene for that?
We were on scene probably between 5 and 7 minutes.
This has been fairly recent, right?
Yeah, less than 5 months.
I guess it's not that recent. I remember reading about something similar more recently. How many patients did you lose? Do you know? How many people were killed?
One out of that.
It's lucky.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. We had lots of head injuries, lots of traumatic injuries, but we only ended up losing one patient out of that. Out of all, it was 10 patients, I think, 9 or 10 patients.
what type of call do you receive that you dread going on?
What we call bariatric calls. Bariatric being severely obese people, 500 plus pounds, and just the mechanics of figuring out what's wrong with that person, assessing that person, whenever you're at that kind of weight, moving that person. We've got special stretchers and ambulances that have to move those kind of people. Sometimes that involves taking door frames off, and there's been at one point where the person was in an apartment, and we actually had to cut the apartment wall out to get that person out of the house because they couldn't fit through the door frames. So those are always calls where it's labor intensive, and it is what it is. But a lot of times they're not that serious. It's because they didn't keep up with their medications or something along those lines.
Do you know it's a bariatric call from dispatch, or is it something you kind of learn the hard way when once you get on scene?
It happens both ways. Usually the caller, whoever's calling 911, they're generally kind enough to tell them, hey, this patient weighs, 600 pounds, and then dispatch relay that information to us. And so we can get the correct units and everybody with the right capabilities roll into that. Sometimes they don't tell you, and so you get on scene, you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna need some more resources to make this call work.
I assume that not all dispatchers are the same. Do you have dispatchers who you know by voice and you know are good or better?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we only have a few dispatchers in the city that work on the fire side. They have a lot more that work on the PD side. So they work in the same building, but they don't run the same dispatch. And so we only have a few. And yeah, luckily all of our dispatchers are pretty good. But yeah, there's some that are able to give us a little bit more information and a little bit faster information than others.
Do you ever do feedback with dispatchers? Do you know if there's a feedback loop where they're saying, hey, we could have used this, or this was too much information? That's formal. Have you ever been involved in something like that?
Not directly with dispatch. Usually I'll pass that up my chain of command. And the usually my captain, the captain through the chief, and the chiefs have a direct line to dispatch to help out with that.
What's the most exciting type of call where you get the call and you're like, yeah, this is go time. It's gonna be fun.
Fires, especially you get dispatched to, we have structure fires and we have, wildland fires. And as far as the structure fires go, you've got residential and commercial. And then, you hear a commercial structure fire come in, you're like, oh yeah, it's go time. And then you hear that multiple calls. You hear, you got multiple calls on a fire. It's going. We're doing some work today.
So when you say multiple calls, multiple units are called to respond. Is that what you mean?
So usually multiple calls mean that multiple people have called in that fire.
Oh, got it, got it. Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
So
Is there
that's
one
usually,
fire? How often do you respond to fires? Is it once a month, twice a month?
I wish I could give a number, but it's so sporadic. We
Yeah.
could go 2 months without having a fire. And then, from like mid-December to up until a couple weeks ago, we were probably making a fire every shift or every other shift. So it's very sporadic of when it happens. You never know. You might have a run of fires, and then you might have a dry spell where you don't catch one for months.
Anyone really stand out to you as being, I guess, just fun and or interesting in what developed, or especially challenging?
It's always the first in fires that
The
are
what
always the
fires?
funnest.
The first
Call it
in?
first in. Yeah,
Okay,
so
go
you're the
ahead.
first unit on scene.
Got it.
So it's kind of difficult as a ladder company because we're slower than the engines, right? An aerial company is going to be slower than an engine. Engine's fast. They're the pumper. They got the hand lines. They're usually who does the fire attack. And as an aerial company, we usually do what we call truck work, whether that's search and rescue, ventilation on the roof, or something along the lines of that. Anytime you can make it first on scene to a fire, that means you're having all the fun. You're putting the water on the fire, you're getting the nozzle, you're doing the work. So that's the best part about it.
What's the most scared you've ever been at work?
We had an active shooter call at a high school. So came in, sounded 100% legit, right? We had a full response to that. That was before I was, had anything to do with SWAT or anything. I was on the medic unit that day, and we were responding to what we thought was an active shooter at a high school. And caller was reporting multiple victims, gunmen still in the high school, and so we had the full on response. Luckily, it ended up being a prank call, but that was the most nerve wracking I've ever been on a call. Was hey, this was years ago, so I was still fairly new, and I'm like, man, how do we go about this, right? How do we deal with this situation? And it was a fairly big high school, so that was probably the most nerve-wracking call I've been on. Luckily, it ended up being nothing, but throughout the process, we didn't know it was nothing. So just kind of running through the different scenarios and everything that could possibly go on in my head. And that spurred a lot of training for us afterwards too.
So you're thinking, possibility of yourself getting shot or having to respond to multiple casualties or both.
More so, multiple casualties and how are we going to get, this is a three-story high school. right? Where are these casualties at? How are we getting them out? How is PD securing the scene so we can get in there and, safely get these casualties out? There's a lot of logistics going through my mind of how this is going to work. And then, like I said, luckily that call ended up being nothing, and it spurred a lot of training for us as a department afterwards. And I think something really good came out of it with all that. But
What's the biggest mistake you've made on the job?
not listening to my captain was probably a huge one. Making a fire, and I was still, fairly green, right? I wasn't brand new, but I didn't have enough time on to realize, all the things that go on a fire scene and how to read smoke and stuff like that. So I was, just long enough on to where, yeah, I know what I'm doing, but not long enough on to say, no, I don't know everything that I'm doing. So, being a little gung ho, trying to make a fire attack inside a house, when we shouldn't have, right? It should have been a defensive fire. It was vented through the roof. The fire was gone through the roof already. There was nobody in the house. I was amped up. I was ready to go. I was like, yeah, we're going in there. We're fighting this fire. As he was doing his what we call 360, right? He's walking around the house, checking the conditions on all sides of the house, and I'm breaking open that door, and it's just fire all inside. I should have waited for him to make the call of a defensive fire.
You get your ass chewed on that one?
A little bit, he's always been the guy where he's like, hey, I'd rather have to pull the reins back on you than kick you in the back and have to tell you to go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we get a talking to, but he's understanding of all that. And
If you could invent one new piece of job related equipment, what would it be?
oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know about invent, but if I could get one new piece of job related equipment, it would be ultrasounds for our ambulance.
Really?
Yeah.
What are the ultrasound applications, I guess, beyond pregnancy?
So you've got where you can check their lungs, right? If we're looking for what we call a pneumothorax, a collapsed lung or something, you can go in there and you can check through that pleural space. You can use them for, ultrasound guided IVs. For a lot of our, unhealthy and obese patients, it's hard to get IVs on them. We need to get medications. So you can use that ultrasound to help get IVs and stuff. And they make them so small nowadays where they can plug into iPads. It's not like you need a big machine. Yeah.
I
So,
was going to wonder if it's portable.
yeah. So that would definitely be a piece of equipment. Definitely not the inventor, but I think that would be one of the best pieces of equipment we could get.
Is there one paramedic specific skill that I guess, what is a paramedic specific skill that you are the worst at? Is it, for example, putting IVs in, or reading the cardiology gizmo, or where do you need the most work, or where you just naturally struggle?
I'm pretty good at putting IVs in. I don't miss very often, but then I have, the people I work with that just never miss. And they can throw them in from a mile away, and I'm just like, all right, that knocked my ego down a notch. So it's a perishable skill too.
Interesting.
Whenever, yeah, whenever I don't, if I'm off on vacation and I come back, you I got to try IVs on, one of y'all first before we start trying them on patients, because, I'll miss my first 3 IVs after not doing them for 2 weeks.
Is that the one skill where you need the most work, or you need to keep on the best?
I think it's what I need to keep up with the most, for sure. It's something I need to keep the reps high.
Best part of the job.
Every part of the job, the crews, the camaraderie, right? The brotherhood we get out of this. I've made a whole second family of the fire department, and just everything that comes with that, the relationships, the work for each other.
I imagine that you were probably close to one or two individuals at your first station, your engine station, and maybe they didn't move with you, or they've been transferred, to another station. You don't work with them anymore. Do those relationships endure, or do you just kind of grow apart?
They endure, right? So it's something that's easy when you're on the same shift. The relationships that grow apart or are the ones from my academy, right? Super close with a lot of guys in my academy. We went through the suck together, right? We did it all. We made it through for those 18 months. We spent almost every day with each other. And then you go to different shifts, and I'll see them now, and I haven't seen or talked to this guy in 2 years, So those are the ones that kind of fall to the wayside when you're on different shifts and your schedules just don't line up at all.
Yeah. Is the fire service, I guess, insular? And I mean, do you have any friends who aren't in the fire service?
I do, but not as many anymore, right? It kind of you develop these relationships with these guys, and they kind of foster the same mentality and lifestyles that you do. So when it's important, I think it's important to have friends that are outside the fire service, right? Because as much as I love this job and I love the life that it's given me, it can't be your whole life, right? You need outside perspective from that. But I think the majority of the friendships come from the fire service.
Worst part of the job.
The lack of accountability on a lot of parts, right? So I feel like there's a lack of accountability for the standard to be upheld. I think that's probably the worst part of this service is that there's a lot of people that can skate by being subpar or just making the standard, and I think that's probably the worst part about all this is just not holding people to a higher standard.
Do you want to advance up to be a captain or further someday, or you like what you're doing now? I mean, are you taking the captain's test? Are you on the list? Go ahead.
I am on the captain's list actually. I'm very far at the bottom of it. So we have a written exam for the captains and engineers test and stuff like that. So it's something you study. There's 5 books that they give you to read, and then they'll give you a 100-question test. We do that every year. I haven't studied for it. At this point in my career, I'm not really keen on promoting. I love what I do. I still enjoy riding the ambulance. I still enjoy making the fires as a tailboard and not the guy in charge, right? Just doing the grunt work and not making the command decisions. So at some point, I think I'll be there, but for now, I love the position I'm at, and I don't see myself moving anytime soon.
If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would be your dream job?
You know, Probably owning a body shop. I still love working on hot rods. I still love classic cars, making cars go fast, painting them, making them look good. I'll do that every now and then on the side for some of the guys at the fire stations if they need something painted or worked on.
Do you have your own car like that or cars?
Not anymore. No, I got into motorcycles for a while, and I was souping up my motorcycles and working on those, and I ended up totaling my last one about 3 years ago, and kind of taken a break since then.
Did you get injured?
Yeah, I cracked 2 ribs on my left side and got some road rash. So I was actually on my way up to go hiking in the hill country, and I was taking my motorcycle up there, going a little bit too fast on unfamiliar roads and missed a turn and kind of laid it down. But luckily, I had all my camping gear on my back, and I kind of just slid down on it.
Yeah. Tell me about your last car you had that you souped up. What car was it?
The last car I had was a Mazda Speed 3, actually. It was a little hatchback. It was a little 4-cylinder turbo, and I pulled it out, new manifolds, turbo back exhaust, turbo, did a methanol injection system in it. It went from about 200 horsepower to close to 500.
Was it a two door or four door?
A 4-door hatchback. Yeah, it looked like a little station wagon, but man, that thing was fast.
Super light, right? He says
Yeah, it was front wheel
around
drive
500
too.
horsepower. Really? Wow.
Yeah, so when you hit that gas, you had to make sure you held onto that steering wheel because it was going to jerk to the left real quick.
Have you been in a Tesla or one of the electric cars to see if they're like their acceleration?
I haven't actually. No.
Yeah, curious. I haven't either. Yeah, wow. Good for you. So, if you take, I mean, did you buy that car used?
Yeah, I did.
So, would it cost like 5,000 used? And after you got done with it, how much money did you put into that thing?
I put about $12,000 into it. Yeah, it's not a cheap hobby.
Were you able to sell it and at least get some of your money back?
No, not at all. I actually ended up blowing. I threw a rod and I blew the engine on it, so I got none of my money back on that. I was able to salvage some parts, and that's about it.
That's about it. Yeah, so you don't have that a habit going right now then. So you don't have to fight your wife or hide it from your wife, I guess.
Yeah, not yet. I'm always on the lookout though. Whenever something comes
What are you
up,
looking for? If something come up, tell me if you saw something come up, what specific vehicle you'd be like, yeah, I'm pulling the trigger.
a Datsun 260Z.
Oh, that's old. Is that old one?
Yeah,
I
that's
remember
that's
those
what I'm gonna hunt
280Zs
for.
when they came out. Is
Yeah,
that before the 280Z? Must be.
yeah. Yeah, that was mid late six.
Wow. So would you soup it up or make it classic, and kind of restore it?
That would be more of a restoration project for me. I would like to put more of a modern engine in it, but yeah, it's definitely more of a restoration project than a drag car because I think I kind of
Do you
got
think
that out of my system for now.
do you follow the current vehicles at all?
Here and there, not as much anymore. I've delved a lot more into trying to look for older vehicles. I think the newest vehicle I own right now is a 2006. It's stuff I can work on a lot easier than getting a newer vehicle and having to
So if
learn
I
a
was
bunch of
to ask you,
computers.
help me choose between a Civic Si and a Corolla GR, what you couldn't give me advice, or would you?
The
Or
Corolla
WRX?
GR, those are all solid. I like the options. Subarus are awesome. I had a couple buddies with some of those that still have WRXs, and one of the guys in the fire department actually just got that Corolla GR, and that thing's pretty quick. It's pretty nice. So I don't think you can ever go wrong with getting a Toyota though.
Yeah. uh, Worst job you can imagine.
Something behind a desk, an 8 to 5, sitting in front of a computer screen behind a desk. There's no way I could ever do that.
Best piece of career advice you ever received.
Learn from everybody. You're going to learn good things and you're going to learn bad things from people, but learn from them. Take away the good things and take away the bad things. Don't do the bad things. Don't be like who you see doing those things. But you got to learn from everybody, regardless of what it is.
Describe a specific, or what is a specific bad thing? It needs to be specific that you've seen and learned from not to do.
The guy's getting complacent, right? So it's that's one of the things that I noticed when I was younger. I was a cadet, right, doing the ride outs and coming out, and you would see these guys, and you would learn the good things. The guys that go out there, they check their stuff off every morning, and they make sure everything's in the right condition, the right shape. And then you've got guys that, oh yeah, it's good. I checked that out last shift. Right. Yeah, it's fine. If it doesn't work, I'll figure it out whenever the time comes. And that's just one of those things where you can never get that complacent, especially in this job.
What's your most dangerous on the job mistake that you've made? Can you think of one?
Yeah, it delves back into that complacency, right? So I was cooking breakfast one morning, right? So it was my turn to cook chow, and I was cooking up the breakfast, and I didn't get the rig check done before I started cooking because yeah, I got to feed these guys. They're hungry.
What's a brig check?
A rig check, so
Rig
going
check.
out
Okay.
there checking the truck out, making sure all your stuff's good. So I was cooking up breakfast, and we got a fire call when I was in the middle of cooking up breakfast. Well, if I would have checked out my equipment beforehand, I would have realized that my SCBA bottle, my breathing air was only half full. So that was a huge issue whenever I got there. We got to that fire. Luckily, it was pretty quick. We knocked it out good, and I didn't have to worry about that. But if it would have been a more intense incident and I didn't have a full bottle and the rest of my crew did, that's an issue because I can't just walk out. My crew has to come out with me if I run out of air. We go in as a crew, we come out as a crew. So now I'm hindering them from doing their job and doing the good work because I didn't know that my bottle was half empty in the morning.
Did you hide that mistake from your crew, or did you, when you got back, you said, "Oh, guess what I did"? Have you told them?
Yeah, yeah. No, I told my captain. Luckily I'm fairly decent on air. I can conserve pretty well. I work on that a lot, so it wasn't an issue. But I told the cap when I got back, hey, I'm glad we got it done when we did because the other shift, pass it off onto somebody else, right? But it was my mistake. I didn't check it, but yeah, I told them when I got back. Yeah, bottle was only half full.
How do you work on air? Is that just, I know part of it's fitness, but part of it is economy of movement, staying calm. Lots of things can make you breathe hard. Adrenaline can make you breathe hard. When you say you work on air, what are some of the skills that you practice?
So one of the things I've used to help is it's called a blast mask. And so it's an adapter that screws into your SCBA mask and it restricts your air movement to kind of simulate breathing on air. So I've used that. The only downside to that,
So you can train with that without going on air. Is that what you're saying?
right? Yeah.
Okay.
because that's one of the issues with our that I bring up is that we need to train on air, but it's hard to refill those SCBA bottles. You have to go across town to refill them and stuff like that.
You can't do that at the station, yeah. So that hinders how much you can. Right.
Right. So I got that blast mask to help me, and the only downside to that is it causes a lot of condensation buildup inside your mask. So what I've ended up using that on a lot is the rower because I don't need to see to use the rower. It can condensate all at once. All I know, I got a pool. So I'll use that. Swimming actually has helped me a lot with my lung capacity and stuff like that. We have a pool that's right across from the station. So usually in the mornings when I get off shift, they'll have lap swim. I'll go over there and try to get a few laps in, swim for an hour or so.
Have you ever tried hypoxic swimming?
No.
So there's a couple things you can do. One easy one is 25-meter underwater. So you just do a length, and then you have to be careful. You don't want to have a shower water blackout and get called out by your own guys.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can do underwater, and then wait a minute before you go back, and then progress that by decreasing the time of rest between underwaters. Right. So that's one way to do it. Hypoxic swimming is where you'll start out taking a breath every other stroke. And then you'll do 2 strokes before you take a breath. And then you do 3 strokes before you take a breath. So say you're doing 50 meters, right? So you can work up, there's a couple ways you could do it. You could work up to, taking 10 strokes before you take a breath between 50-meter episodes. Or you could just, 10 rounds of 50 meters at 3 strokes between breaths. And then, or a longer, maybe do 500 meters at 1 stroke between breaths, or maybe it's probably better to start with 250 meters. So 250 meters with 2 strokes between breaths, and then after you do that 2 or 3 times, try to go to 3 strokes without breaths, and then try to work it up. So that's one way to do it. And there's also if you go online and just on the app, you know what free diving is. So free diving is guys who go down, they go really deep and they have to hold their breath. And there's also use the same technique for spearfishing. You can actually get apps for your phone. You don't have to do it in water. You can just hold your breath, right? And so you can just hold your breath, and they have a progression in there where you get to hold your breath longer. I have no idea if this will transfer. Of course, the best thing would be to do the same activity on air, and then see if you can finish the same activity. So for example, let's say you're rowing, you'd have to row on air at the same pace, and go for 10 minutes and then see how much air you used and see if you could increase that and build that way. The best way to do it is on air. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to do these types of studies with firefighters, but they all have the same issue. They can't fill their air at their unit. So it's a huge issue. I mean, you can't practice that skill practically. So some of these other things, I don't know if these other skills would help you on air practically without doing that second assessment. The best thing would be to do it on air, right? Because there's economy, movement, there's fitness, there's all types of different things. So, well, interesting. Sorry for going to that. I was,
Oh, you're good. Yeah, it's good information.
yeah, I always get that. Let's see, I think, did I ask you the best career advice you've ever received? Yeah, the second, the worst piece of career advice you've ever received.
You'll figure it out, right? I just think that that's bad advice in general. You ask a question, hey, what do I do in this situation, or what do I do if a patient does this, or you'll figure it out when the time comes, right? You'll make that instinct decision. Well, no, I don't have the knowledge to make that instinct decision. I haven't been in that situation enough to make that instinct decision. That's advice I really try to stay away from whenever coaching new cadets or something like that. You'll figure it out when you get to the field. So no, you're gonna ask me a question, hey, what do I do in this situation? If I haven't been in that situation, I'm not going to tell you you're going to figure it out, right? I'm going to go find somebody that's been in that situation and get their knowledge. Right? That way we can pass that on, because if you don't have the knowledge or the instincts to make those decisions, then you're not going to figure it out. You're going to make a decision that could harm you or somebody else.
Okay, last question. So I'm going to advise you give your 20-year-old self. So this is after you got arrested for for underage drinking.
Yeah.
So best advice you give your 20-year-old self right now.
Focus on mission direct training and nutrition. So that's always been one of my biggest struggles was my diet, and I've got that fairly taken care of in the last year or so. I've worked a lot on that, but for the longest time, it was fast food, poor diet, and everything else. And I think that contributed a lot it taking so long to get where I'm at fitness standard wise was just not having the appropriate diet. Whether it's, eating once a day and it's only fast food. I can't tell you how many times I've progressing up to this point where I would just not eat enough. Right? I'd be working out, I'd be doing all the things right, but I'd eat one meal a day. And then I finally started tracking, calories, macros, protein, and stuff like that. And I'm tracking it in. I'm like, whoa, I'm way short of where I need to be in this. So kind of just keeping track of that kind of stuff and making it a priority.
Have you struggled keeping weight on or getting fat?
I've struggled keeping weight on is the biggest struggle is I don't eat enough for the most part. And generally when I do, it's not good food. Like I said, so luckily I've made that a priority, over the past year or two, and it's gotten a lot better. But yeah, it's always been I've struggled to maintain weight and making goals, even though I'm working all the fitness aspects of it.
Well, Chris, thanks for becoming part of our athlete team. Looking forward to your working with you over the coming years and months. Excited some of the stuff you'll help us with and contribute. I guess any question, I'll ask this again, any question I should have asked that I didn't.
I think we very thorough on this. I appreciate there are some questions where I thought I had good answers to, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, man, yeah, that's a good question. I should have thought about that more. But no, I think it was great. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I appreciate everything you've done for us so far, and allowing me to be a part of this team.
All right. Thanks again.
Absolutely.